Can paying better attention to what we eat help protect our brains from degenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and dementia? It's an appealing proposition, one that crops up in the new book, The Healthy Brain: Optimize Brain Power at Any Age. How big a role can nutrition play? Well, let's find out. From the author of that book, Aileen Burford Mason. She's a cell biologist at DRS Consulting in Toronto, specializing in nutrition for disease prevention. Dr. Samir Sinha, Director of Geriatrics, Mount Sinai Hospital, and Institute of Health Policy Management and Evaluation at the University of Toronto. And Nalini Sen, Director of the Alzheimer's Society Research Program. Let's start by just reading an excerpt from your book that will set up the discussion to come. Mr. Director, if you would. As the most metabolically active organ of the body, the brain has nutritional needs that are 10 times higher than those of any other organ. So it may be the first organ to falter when nutrients are undersupplied. It is now accepted that far from being an inevitable part of the aging process, dementia is a lifestyle disease, with poor nutrition being a major risk factor. Every day, new evidence is published that underscores the idea that poor nutrition at any stage of life can compromise brain health. It is the cumulative effect over years of failing to meet the nutritional demands of the brain to sustain its functioning and repair damage that leads to its final collapse. Get us started, Aileen. Has diet traditionally been part of the thinking as to why dementia, Alzheimer's, these kinds of things present?
Unfortunately, Steve, I would like to say diet has been central to healthcare and medicine from the go-get, but
you can't say
that's
that.
not the case.
Not the case.
So I think one of the functions, really, of discussing dementia is that it's really concentrated our minds on what it is in diet that we must get into us every day, essential nutrients, and why the brain, which is more metabolically active than most tissues, many orders of magnitude more than skeletal muscle, for example. So metabolic processes, yes, they use oxygen, they use glucose, but they use all the essential nutrients, all the vitamins, the minerals, amino acids, essential fats. So when they're demonstrably short in our diet, and we only have to look at Health Canada's website to see that, in large swathes of the population, many of these critical nutrients are severely undersupplied. We know it's got an effect.
Okay, if it has not been the case since time immemorial that we've considered diet related to these issues, how long has it been the case?
Very recently, unfortunately. It's still not taught in medical schools. Nutrition is really not a part. The average number of hours that a doctor will receive of nutritional education is about 19 on average in North America.
Well, let me go to Dr. Sinha on this. You didn't just graduate from med school yesterday, despite your youthful good looks.
Two days ago.
2 days ago, okay. Is she right about what she says?
Well, I think this is the challenge that we find that in healthcare. Traditionally, I think people thought about nutrition and our bodies more so, but I think as we've medicalized healthcare more and we think about diseases and medications and that, sometimes people want a pill for every ill, whereas we're now starting to get back to basics and talking about the importance of function, of movement, of diet, of sleep, of a lot of those motherhood statements, eat your vegetables. Well, actually, there was something really behind that. And I don't think, as Aileen is saying, I don't think we've really caught up in making sure that our curriculums reflect all of the new knowledge we have today, which really needs to have a more holistic approach.
Let me go over to the Alzheimer's Society. How long has nutrition been a part of the thinking behind the research that you folks are doing?
It's been some time, and I know that based on evidence that we're aware of and experts who we've interacted with over the past while, we know that it's only been in most recent years, over the past 20 years really, that we know that exercise and diet have a direct impact on reducing risks and instances of dementia. And so there is a great focus that we place within the Alzheimer's Society research program on diet itself, within our quality of life research, which we support. But in addition to that, we also believe, and further to the quote that you referred to, that it is in fact a lifestyle disease, so dementia itself. So we really refer people to focusing on pursuing and having a healthy diet. Think about the colors of a rainbow when you're selecting fruits and vegetables to eat. Things like that are dark blue in color for antioxidants, like blueberries and blackberries, green spinach and broccoli for brain health, for your bones and teeth.
It all contributes.
It all contributes.
You just used two words that I saw them in your book, and you just used them again. The notion of dementia as a lifestyle disease. You're the medically trained doctor here. Do you agree with that?
You know, I think lifestyle plays a large factor, and I think we're learning, but I bristle a little bit about just classifying dementia as a lifestyle disease, the idea that you just do these things and you won't get dementia. You know, there's virtually 100 different types of dementias, Alzheimer's dementia being the most common type. Some are genetically based, some are related to, you know, things beyond our control. But much of dementia, for example, if we're not smoking, if we're exercising, if we're actually having a better diet, there's a lot of influencing things that we can do, including getting a good education, those sorts of things. So lifestyle has a role to play, but I wouldn't necessarily just paint the entire disease as one being one that's a lifestyle disease.
So, Aileen, I want to know if you want to walk that back a bit, the notion that dementia is, quote unquote, a lifestyle disease.
Right. Well, one of the interesting things we're seeing now, when we study populations that have been nutritionally deprived, historically it was sort of areas of natural famine. But, for example, in the UK, there's the 1958 birth cohort. That was when rationing finished after the end of the Second World War. So there was concern that babies born during that period would not have received sufficient nutrition for optimal brain development, where, you know, I mean, just because a baby's born with, you know, 2 ears, 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, you know, the right number of limbs, doesn't necessarily make it an optimal baby, well born. Now, if we follow those people through, what we're showing is many of what we call lifestyle diseases, like metabolic syndrome, which leads on and is a risk factor for diabetes, heart disease, and also Alzheimer's. These are occurring more in people who were born of babies of low weight, short for size, or prematurely. So that's a nutritional aspect.
In which case, let me ask the doctor if he wants to expand his potential understanding of Alzheimer's and dementia as a lifestyle disease.
Well, again, I think it's the idea that when you go back, as we're learning more about, you know, dementias, or if you take Alzheimer's, for example, there's these concepts of proteins, you know, plaques and tangles. There's a genetic aspect to it. You know, as Aileen is saying, that if you think about dementia, and there's been a great series of literature that's come out recently talking about the preventative things that we can do throughout the lifespan, that those who have actually pursued, you know, a longer course of education, why we're seeing rates of dementia actually decrease in our society is that we're generally more of us are likely to have finished high school. If we're actually dealing with hearing loss at a younger age, for example, we know that by treating that and dealing with that, we're preventing dementias from occurring. So I think right from the beginning, a good, healthy lifestyle, as much as one can pursue, will actually have benefits to the brain and the rest of the body. But I just caution that with some of my patients, I want them to make sure that they don't feel that if mom didn't give me my vegetables, this is all her fault.
Right.
Not necessarily.
So a lot of this, well, in fact, let me take that and put it to you then finally. We'll just wrap this up here.
Right.
You'll acknowledge there's a lottery involved here too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Some
And
folks,
there's
it's
certainly a genetic
and-
component.
Okay.
And, you know, certainly what's good for your heart is good for your brain. So that from a lifestyle perspective, that's what we're trying to support, you know, that pursue healthy options and try to reduce your risk. But certainly there are other components that we certainly don't have any control over, and we are not aware of what's actually causing the disease to come on. So.
Okay, Aileen, getting you back into the mix here. Beta amyloid. At the risk of overdoing it here with scientific terms, this one we need to know about. What does it have to do with dementia?
Well, it has a normal function in the brain, which we're not altogether clear about.
What is it to begin with?
It is a protein, but it, like many proteins in the body, can be damaged, can collapse, can make different forms and accumulate. you can get, large amounts of this building up. Now, that's a problem for the brain because it interferes with neuronal functioning. So you can get clumps of amyloid building up on the brain. Now, we may have oversimplified our approach to saying, excess amyloid in the brain equals dementia, because there are studies, post-mortem studies, showing that people with quite large amounts of amyloid in their brain had perfectly normal cognitive function when they were alive. So we can't blame any one of these things, but it is quite clear that when these may get damaged, these proteins, through the natural activity of the brain. When we're working our brain hard during the day, we're firing off a lot of damaging free radicals all the time. They have the potential to damage the brain. And this is where our spinach would come in and our colorful vegetables, because they provide antioxidants that will dampen down these damaging free radicals. So, I mean, we really haven't fully worked it out. And the reason we know that is that any of the drugs that have been developed that have targeted those proteins have been miserable failures.
In which case, I want to follow up with you, Nalini, because I want you to tell us about some of the research that's going on in British Columbia right now that I think your society is helping to fund that could shed some light on how controlling beta amyloids outside the brain could have an impact on the buildup of beta amyloids inside the brain.
Okay, so recently some findings were released from an investigation that was carried out by Dr. Wei-Hung Song and his colleagues at the University of British Columbia, where they looked at mouse models, and they created a gene that took on beta amyloid, which is not normally something that's developed within mice. Mice don't, develop Alzheimer's disease. So they placed that within a mouse model, and that model developed amyloid plaque, beta amyloid plaque, and they conjoined it with a healthy mouse. And in doing so, what they found was that the beta amyloid protein transferred into the blood of the healthy mouse, and that mouse then developed amyloid plaque as well.
I know this is one study, and we shouldn't get too far over our skis here, as the expression goes, but how distressing do you find that news?
Well, I think it's the context, right? I see patients every day, and and many of my patients are struggling with dementias, various forms of dementia, and I think I try and break this down at a very practical level, right? There's a ton of research going on. As Eileen was saying, is that some of the work that's been done around testing medications and things, we don't have any medication. There's no cure for dementias. There's no medication out there right now that's a known what we call disease-modifying agent. So there's no medication out there that will slow down the dementia, even though we hear about these things. And then when you start getting in the world of nutrition, people often say, well, if I take this or I take that, will that stop or slow or prevent or whatever? And we don't really have the great definitive evidence that we need. What we do know, and what I remind all my patients, is that exercising regularly, having a good diet, these are things that you can do, and making sure your blood pressure is under control, healthy heart, healthy brain. These are things that we know you can do to help prevent dementia or slow its progression. Do we have all the answers or solutions? No. Are there going to be contradictory studies tomorrow and the day after? Absolutely. Will we eventually find a cure? I'm very hopeful that it will be coming along.
Tell me when.
The best predictions right now, I heard a good podcast the other day, someone that I really trust and believe was saying maybe in 10 to 20 years. But until then, it really is focusing on things that we can modify with our lifestyle.
In which case, Eileen, are there nutritional ways that you have discovered to control beta amyloids?
Well, in my case, there's no way I could know I was controlling beta amyloid. What you're trying to do is to create optimal conditions of nutrition. And one of the confused areas in terms of looking at nutrients and the brain, and I'm talking about the micronutrients now, so vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin C, etc., is that we're studying them singly or in tiny groups. That is not the way they work. They all work together. And, just as with your car, it doesn't matter whether there's no gas in the tank, there's no spark plugs, or a wheel missing, it's still not going. This is true of the brain. And so just to say, oh, well, we studied vitamin D and we gave it at what we thought was high levels, which is debatable as well, and we didn't get the effect we needed. You say, well, vitamin D doesn't work without magnesium. So are you studying magnesium when we know probably 95% of North Americans do not meet the RDA for magnesium?
Recommended daily allowance.
Recommended daily allowance. So basically, it's a complex issue. Research has very much got embedded in reducing everything to single variables to study. And now we have to go backwards and find ways of studying complexity again.
You, I think at the very beginning of this book, in the introduction, write that there are many patients nowadays who know more than their doctors about nutrition. This gets back to what you talked about earlier, about doctors getting so little nutritional training during their education. Okay, this is obviously because of the internet, and everybody thinks that they're going to be their own doctor now because they can look up their own diagnosis on the internet and come in all smart. But okay, there's tons of misinformation on the internet as well, right?
Yeah, just can we backtrack a little bit there when I say actually doctors do get nutritional education. They don't recognize it as being clinically relevant. So they all have to study biochemistry, and that's exactly what we're talking about. When I teach continuing medical education courses, it's a joy to teach doctors because you can just watch the light bulbs go on in the room as they're exposed to the research. And they're going out saying, we should have known this stuff. You don't blame them for not pursuing the nutritional research because they've enough, it's a hard enough job to keep up with your own subject area without branching out into studying nutrition. You need to be directed into it. So they do actually study nutrition.
Okay, having said that, I saw your head nodding when I was doing the lead up to that last question, which makes me believe that you have the odd patient who comes in claiming to know better than you. What's wrong with him or her because they checked it out on the internet?
No, I encourage, I think the one thing is just we want to have patients engaged in their healthcare, right? I rather have a patient and a family engaged in their healthcare than not engaged. That's hands down. I think most doctors will say that. Because again, with a lot of things being lifestyle oriented, if someone's engaged and interested, then they're actually going to do things. I think what I get very protective with my patients and their families around is when there's a lot of misinformation. Because people will come in and they'll say, well, what about coconut oil, and that's the latest thing.
The latest from Gwyneth Paltrow.
Yeah, that I've read this or I do that and whatever. And I think, I think the key is that for very complex issues like dementia, which there are many different types of dementias, there are many different factors that claim, sometimes we're just looking for a simple solution, right? Just give me the pill or just tell me the one thing or the one vitamin that I have to take. And I think as Eileen's saying, there's lots of different things working together. What I try and make sure that people know is that, again, if you're eating a relatively healthy diet, right, you don't need to supplement with a whole bunch of supplements. There are certain vitamins and mineral deficiencies that can lead to problems with your brain. And that's, I think all doctors need to know that information so they can look appropriately and make sure that any deficiencies are being treated. But again, we have to be really careful that I have sometimes patients coming in with such a boatload of vitamins and minerals that they don't even have any room to eat real food because they're busy they think that all those supplements are better than real food. So it's a bit of a complex, but you want people engaged, but you want them to have access to the right knowledge.
I would be interested in knowing how you advise your clients and or patients through the Alzheimer's Society as to, okay, this is good, do this. This is snake oil, avoid this.
Okay. There's a wealth of information available online, and certainly what we refer people to do is really look at the source of the information. Is it based on a journal article, and what does the evidence actually say? And if they're not sure, then visit the Alzheimer's Society website, www.alzheimer.ca. We have evidence-based information that's available to the public. It's reviewed on an ongoing basis, on an annual basis. We have information on diagnosis that can also assist physicians who maybe have questions, and we can't expect them to know every single thing. And so it's really something, we're there to support individuals who are seeking diagnosis for themselves, caregivers who want to support their loved ones, and the healthcare professionals as well.
Well, in fact, you've got something called the Brain Health Food Guide. What is that?
Right. The Brain Health Food Guide was actually something that was developed by the Canadian Consortium for Neurodegeneration and Aging, a consortium that's composed of over 400 investigators across Canada from various disciplines, but within in which the Alzheimer's
I got
Society
it
is
here.
very
You want to hold it up?
pleased. Oh, sure.
There you go.
The
That's a copy
Alzheimer's
of it right
Society is
there.
very pleased to be a partner of this initiative. But there's a team that focuses on nutrition. And this team, what they did was they looked at individuals over the age of 50 and saw how they were able to benefit from a healthy brain diet. And what this diet is, it really looks at, resorting to fruits and vegetables that are, very colorful in nature. It recommends that people eat more fish, nuts, and less red meat, less processed meat.
How about soda pop and chocolate cake?
Reduced sweets. You can
reduce,
perhaps
not eliminate
not
it.
eliminate,
Okay.
perhaps in moderation.
I'm okay with that
I
then.
wasn't
All
involved in this, but but it's a really unique guide that actually it was based on various studies that took place, and what it showed was that after 4 months of having healthier diet, of pursuing this diet, that people actually experienced they produced or they carried out their certain tests that were presented to them in reading and writing speeds, and conducted themselves as though they were actually 9 years younger. And for people who had a healthy diet for 4 years, they actually didn't experience any memory loss based on the investigations that were taking place. 36% of those individuals actually had a decreased risk of Alzheimer's disease, and 27% had a decreased risk of mild cognitive impairment based on this study.
Well, that's significant.
So, pretty interesting. Yeah.
Agreed. Apropos of Dr. Sinha's grandmother telling us to eat our vegetables, let's find out. How many times a day? How many servings of vegetables every day should we have in order to help deal with these issues?
Well, it's the difference between adequate and optimal.
Okay.
And optimal is becoming quite clear now. The 5-a-day rule was, I think, a mistake from the go-get. It's suitable for children, it's not suitable for adults. And the latest meta-analysis are looking, and these have come from different countries, not just one country. They're looking at 10 a day. So at 5 a day, usually you have to look at the number of servings against some disease, and they usually use all-cause mortality, which is really shorthand for getting any chronic illness. And at 5 a day, there was actually no benefit. But as you go to 6 and 7 to 8 to 9, at 10, the curve starts to flatten off.
Can you tell us what that looks like, 10 a day?
10 a day is actually not as much as you would think. A serving size is half a cup of fruit or vegetables, baseball size piece of fruit, we often say. Raw vegetables obviously take up more space, so it would be a whole cup of, say, spinach or kale. And as long as you sort of make vegetables and fruit the core of your eating, and you don't expect dinner to make up your 10 a day, it's not that difficult, actually. All my clients do it all the time. They work towards it, and at first they go seriously, but after a while they get used to it. And what really happens in the end is they start to crave them, and they love. People will say to me, "Oh, I love the way I eat now." It's not, oh my goodness, do I have to eat that? And it's not all kale and spinach, There's so many varieties of fruit and vegetables.
Let me ask Samir Sinha, your specialty is geriatric patients.
Yeah.
Let's assume that we're talking here about people in their 80s and 90s who potentially, for 8 or 9 decades of their lives, have not had their 10 a day. How challenging is it to try to get them at this stage of the game to change their diets?
It is. Habits. They.
No kidding.
If you're 90 years old and you've had, I was just talking to a patient of mine the other day about what is in his diet, and he said steak, eggs, all the usual things. And anyways, we're focusing on reducing his drinking instead, right? So.
How are you going to tell a guy who's 95 years old you got to have 10 a day?
Well, I think part of it, again, is also making, trying to make things fun, right? So one of the things I do is, while we talk about lifestyle being, with a focus today around nutrition, I also emphasize exercise. And people say, well, what's the right exercise? And I'm like, what type of exercise would you even consider doing? Because if you're going to do that exercise, it's the best exercise for you. So similarly, right, I don't really like kale. I'm going to openly admit that, right? But that doesn't mean that I can't actually find other things. And I think part of it is is also just exploring. Go through the fruit and vegetable section. Think about the fun things that you might want to eat. And maybe it's a bit more fruit heavy versus vegetable heavy. But I think the key is by incorporating or thinking about different ways and understanding the different ways you can incorporate fruits and vegetables into your diet. People do make transitions, but it can't be done something overnight.
What's the verdict on chocolate? And do you want to make a distinction between dark and light?
I do indeed.
Okay.
So chocolate is probably the only thing that most of us love that we could almost call a health food. And the reasons are many. And one of the things I find very sort of dismaying about research sometimes is researchers research whatever techniques they have in their lab and whatever their interest is in the lab. Chocolate is one of the richest sources of magnesium from
Dark
diet.
or light?
Both.
Both.
But the problem with the light, the milk chocolate, is that there's too much sugar in it. It'll spike blood sugar and therefore insulin. And insulin will deplete magnesium, so it's counterproductive. So if you have dark chocolate and it's over 70% cocoa butter, it will not spike insulin. People will often say, it's very filling, dark chocolate. It's not that it's very filling, it's that it hasn't made your blood sugar go up too high, and therefore you're satisfied with a smaller amount. Whereas with the milk chocolate, your blood sugar goes sky high, then insulin brings it crashing down, and your brain, which can't work without glucose, is saying, I'm sorry, I have no sugar, I need some more.
Okay, given that you've now taken all the joy out of eating chocolate, let's figure out when we actually look at a
Why
package.
is that?
Well,
It has
Anyway.
antioxidants as well, you see. So
but what-
one researcher will look at flavonoids and say there's a ton of antioxidants in it, and they'll forget that there's magnesium without which the brain can't function.
so if we're going to look at the back and look at all those ingredients in there, what are the numbers that we should be looking at to say, okay, that's chocolate we can have, and this is chocolate that's actually not going to be helpful?
Okay, so 70% cocoa butter or higher,
70% cocoa butter or higher is
good.
good. Okay, note to self. All right, one other thing, Aileen, I'm going to stick with you. One of the controversial aspects of your book is what you have to say about vitamin and mineral supplements, and you think they ought to be part of the diet. And let's do a little excerpt from the book here. Although the food we eat is of fundamental importance, hardworking brains benefit from additional nutrients in the form of supplements to ensure optimal function and maintain brain health. There's a raging debate about whether supplements are any damn good at all.
Of course, I'm at the front line all the time.
Okay, so why have you weighed in as you have weighed in?
Well, I absolutely agree that diet is the most important thing. You could undermine the best supplement regime with poor diet. It's very easy to do that. But I do challenge the idea that there's sufficient of all the nutrients in the food. In fact, once I visited a supplement company that was owned by a drug company, and they had a poster up, I wish I had it now to show you, of the amount of food you'd have to eat to get the recommended daily intake of every essential nutrient. And it was like a big mountain of food. So there's that aspect of it. There's the fact that our brains will just, even if you tell us what nutrients are in what food, our brains can't compute it. And the third thing is it's becoming clear that now that we're beginning to image the brain, and I think we've learned more about the brain in the last 10 years since we could actually image functioning in real time than ever before. Now we can see, for example, experiments done in healthy, fit young men, no medication, no health problems at all, apparently fit, and presumably representative of the best part of our population. And when you stress them, put them under stress, intellectual stress in the laboratory, you can compare how their brains function if they're on nothing, a placebo, if they're on a regular multivitamin, which has the recommended daily allowance in it, or a special multivitamin that some researchers have been studying, which actually has 10 to 15 times the amount of B vitamins and vitamin C, etc. And you can show that they function better. Not only physically, but mentally.
Let me get Nalini's take on this. The advisability of taking a multivitamin every day. Your take?
We would really recommend that people consult their family doctors to see what's best for them, and we refer people to healthy sources of vitamins through foods, natural foods, and fruits and vegetables, and that sort of thing.
How do you handle your patients as it relates to advising them on supplements, vitamins, etc.?
Yeah, so part of the workup for dementias that doctors and others usually do is just actually take a look at, do you have deficiencies of certain minerals or vitamins or even metabolic disturbances such as diabetes or thyroid issues? If someone actually has, there's specific vitamin deficiencies we look for, like vitamin B12 deficiency is a classic one that's commonly associated with poor thinking and memory. And that's one where I'll actively prescribe vitamin B12 to be taken. But most people actually, their B12 is actually pretty good. So that's a person that I wouldn't actually prescribe B12. Now, if someone has a questionable diet, maybe not an ideal diet, and they say, Doc, what do you think? Should I take a multivitamin? I have no problems with that. But I also try and balance between the practicality of, what is the quality of the vitamin, who's made it, and also, can you even afford that? Because for some of my folks, it's the difference between buying those vitamins or actually getting out to the local exercise program at the senior center or doing whatever else there is. So there's a lot of different things to consider, but I don't routinely prescribe vitamins, only if I have a compelling reason to do so.
You want the last word?
Well, B12 is a very good example because we have what we call the reference range for B12. How is that derived? From the population, mean and plus or minus 2 standard deviations. If you look at our reference range for B12, and by the way, there is no upper limit and no restriction on the amount of B12 you can take. If you look at measurements right bang slap in the middle of our normal range, there are studies following people from the age of 65 onwards. For 5 years, you can measure their brain shrinking, which is a precursor to dementia. So I really challenge the idea that we do get optimal amounts of the micronutrients from a casual diet, or even one that's more focused on colorful fruits and vegetables. I think we have a challenge there.
Okay, let's finish up with the following. I want to remind everybody, okay, there's that. This is the Brain Health Food Guide. And this is all, this is all over the internet, right? People can get this anywhere. Let us also bring to people's attention the Healthy Brain. And that is the latest contribution of Aileen Burford Mason, whose name I heard pronounced 2 different ways, Aileen and Eileen. Which do you prefer?
Aileen with an A.
There you go. Okay. And otherwise, my thanks to Nalini Sen from the Alzheimer's Society Research Program, Samir Sinha from Mount Sinai Hospital and the Institute of Health Policy at U of T, and Aileen Burford Mason, author of The Healthy Brain. Good of all of you to join us on TVO tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.